Collective. We are a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic worldview of the Bible. And we're actually in a series now. This is the second part. I'm hoping this will be really interesting and enriching to us all. Redirecting mind chatter. And today we're going to talk about redirecting mind chatter with acceptance. Hey, Andy, good to see you. And Lisa, good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Mikkel, great to see you. So, redirecting mind chatter with acceptance. Bill Buckner was a solid 20-year Major League Baseball player, but his time with the Red Sox is probably the period he's most remembered for. In Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, New York Mets' Mookie Wilson hit a routine ground ball that passed right through Bill Buckner's legs, giving the Mets the win and forcing a Game 7 that the Mets would also win. You've probably seen this clip. For those of you who are a little older, you may even remember it. It was pretty staggering. But what's interesting about this is that 20 days earlier, Buckner himself laid out the story he was telling himself about this exact scenario. In an interview that later appeared in ESPN's documentary Catching Hell, he said these words: "The dreams are that you're going to have a great series and win. The nightmares are that you're going to let the winning run score on a ground ball through your legs. Those things happen, you know. I think a lot of it is just fate." End of quote. Wow. Hey, Neats, good to see you. Hope my grandbaby is watching too, and Bugsy and my son. Your brain loves words, and it connects to stories. And again, if you missed last week, I encourage you to just watch last week, because this really connects with what's in that. The story that Bill Buckner told himself was that nightmare story. He obviously had already envisioned it. He rehearsed it. He was speaking it. He said errors happen that cost the game, and it's just fate. Well, if they happen and it's fate, then it will happen. And the exact thing that he says he fears, he envisions and speaks. As we said last week, the brain is designed to keep you safe, but it's not necessarily designed to move you towards success. It is not moved by logic, as we spoke about, like the infinitesimal chance of that actually happening to him. He was a pretty good player. In fact, it is moved by emotion, which is what you feel when you imagine something that you fear happening. It connects to what your brain connects to what you emotionally feel and says, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. It gets its operational system from your emotionally charged stories that you tell yourself. And then your words reinforce that. Now, here's something that we really know. Hey, Sissy. Hey, Rye. Good to see you. Here's something that we really probably already know. It says by Rabbi Citron, Devarim, which is Hebrew for words, are our share in the divine power to create or to devastate. Again, our divine power to create or to devastate. This is the power that we know, we fully understand in our words. A lot of times people envision and speak about what they don't want to happen. I'm so afraid this will happen, or I hope this doesn't happen. And there's a lot of neuroscience people that believe that your brain doesn't understand negative directives like, don't do this. I knew a doctor who told me this pretty amazing story. She was getting a humanitarian award, and she was really not comfortable with being in front of people. She was very quiet and very shy, let alone having to walk up on a stage to get an award in front of people. And when she arrived at the theater where the event was going to be held, she saw that there were tall stairs with no railing. And she said to herself, oh no, those stairs are too high, I'm going to fall. And she kept saying over and over and over again to herself as she was sitting there in the theater, don't fall on the stairs, don't fall on the stairs, don't fall on the stairs. Well, what do you think happened to her when she walked up those stairs to get her award? She fell, and she fell bad. And the whole auditorium just gasped, and everyone stood up, and people started to try to help her, and it was just really horrifying to her. But again, as we know, as we said last week, where your attention goes, as the saying goes, energy flows. Where your attention goes, energy flows. Now, she could have done a lot of things. If she was a little nervous to walk up those stairs without railing, she could have asked for an escort. In other words, I'm not suggesting to be in some kind of denial. If you're clumsy, you may want an escort to help you go up the stairs, right? But fixating on the thought of her falling and saying those words over and over and over again did not help her brain do what she wanted, which was getting her up the stairs, onto the stage, and accepting the award. And that is the power of our thoughts and our words. Psalm 141:3 says, set a guard, Adonai, over my mouth. Keep watch at the door of my lips. Hey, Danielle, good to see you. Hey, Phoebe. I love that it says the door of my lips, because it really suggests things that come in and come out, right? That are an entrance and an exit, which is what words are. An example of this would be people in some types of psychological therapies that spend years talking about the same past traumas and rehearsing the same future fears. And again, where's the energy? Where's the focus? What are their words constantly putting out there? Regret and fear, right? Regret about the past and fear in the future. Be watchful about what you allow your energy to be invested in. That it's very important. It's simple and yet it's so deep. So if that replaying loop gets you going with those same thoughts, those same fears, what do? Well, let's recap what we talked about last week. The first thing that we do when something happens, either a trauma that happens, because again, our brain will try to start making sense of what that trauma is, because again, it doesn't know the difference between that psychological trauma and you're actually going to die. So it's trying to make sense of a trauma and figure out what's happening. And Brene Brown just has a great quote here. I'm going to let you read it. The story I'm telling myself is. So right in the very beginning, when something happens, you say, the story I'm telling myself is, again, because we're a people of story. And we will always tell a story about an event. So what is the story that you're telling yourself about this pain or this trauma that happened? Number two, the lies connected to that story about myself, others, or God are. And again, we spoke about this last week, but there's always going to be lies connected to emotional trauma, always. The lies that connected to that story, the lies are always about three things: us, God, and other people. So number two, the lies connected to that story about myself, others, or God are. Number three, the truths that counter those lies are. So now that we identify the story that we're telling ourselves, we understand what the lies are that connect to those stories. Now we're going to ask ourselves, what are the truths that counter those lies? And I posted this actually in Sabbath Collective last week. So if you want to kind of take a look at it or even download it yourself, you can do that. And you write down those truths, because those truths are going to replace the lies. And the last one, number four, connect to those truths through envisioning, through affirmations, and through gratitude. And we're going to get into number four next week in depth. But after this process, After you go through these four, if a thought pops up again that you don't necessarily want popping up, because your brain is doing what brains do, which is making connections with things. But if you think, hey, I don't want you to make connections in this way, and again, the brain does this, it may say to you, well, the last time you were in this city, this happened. You remember that. Again, it's trying to protect you. But if you don't want it to do that, to make those connections, here's what you do. It's something very simple. And that is we identify and accept the mind chatter. Acceptance is not agreement, but it is also not battling. And this is really an important concept. So, what you need to understand with this is we identify and accept the mind chatter. Identify is don't just let it slip by. So, if a thought comes into your brain, don't just kind of let it be downloaded and you don't observe it and you're not mindful about it and it's not working for you. It's not something that's truth. Don't just let it slip through. Observe the thought and then accept the thought. Okay, it's there. Hey, Josh, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Oh, you have to go to Chinese class. Okay, ni hao, Ryan. Accept the thought, observe the thought. It's there, and then the energy drain is battling what you don't want. So, in other words, you don't start battling it. Oftentimes, we talk about we've got to fight and we've got to conquer these thoughts and all this kind of war language. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. It is simply accepting what is at the present moment, but not necessarily wanting the thoughts or agreeing that this will be forever. Are you tracking with me? Give me a thumbs up if you understand what I'm saying when I say acceptance. It's not that you're agreeing with it. It's just that you're not putting all this energy into fighting it, right? Because again, you're going to write down the truths that counter it. But it's there. Acceptance doesn't mean you cannot want change and work for change. It's not that you gave up and gave in to these thoughts, but you're not using any energy fighting it, which is energy that's focus. The lack of energy focus and redirection, which is what we're going to talk about next week, actually silences it and it reprograms your brain because we're not putting all this energy into thinking about the thing that we don't want. Mikhail says, can you please give an example of acceptance? Yes, let me give you an example of acceptance. So there's a man who I was just speaking to, who had reoccurring thoughts about seeing his business fail. So he had a business and he actually had two previous bankruptcies, business bankruptcies before. And he had all of his employees put out and they lost their pay and he felt awful. And he started a new business. It seemed to be going really well. And he kept having this fear, and he kept seeing all of his employees with no jobs. And that constant mind chatter was in his head all the time. He would get up and say, oh my gosh, if it was a slow day, oh my gosh. And also connected, that was the story he was telling himself, like we spoke about. The story he was telling himself was that his business was going to fail like the others did. The lies that connected with that story was that he was untrustworthy and he was even a dangerous person to other people. So again, the story he was telling himself was, my business is going to fail. I'm so afraid my business is going to fail. The lies that were connected to that is, I'm a dangerous person. I'm not trustworthy. And again, these thoughts pop into your head, but you are not your passing thoughts. In fact, when you have an evasive thought, as they say, or an invading thought, you don't even have time to kind of discern what's up. These thoughts aren't really you. They're just random bits of information that your brain is kind of trying to piece together. This was not his story. And battling it actually fueled it because it put energy into it. And the words that he spoke actually emphasized it. But when he wrote down truths that countered the lies about himself and about God, and when he did the fourth part, which we're going to do next week, the affirmation, the prayerful affirmation, the gratitude, when he did all of that, when he took this path, the thoughts got less empowered and ultimately finally disappeared as they were redirected and replaced. But as he was walking through this, Mikkel, if a thought came into his mind, like, oh, you're a terrible person, all these people think you're a great guy, but really they're all going to be out of work and they're going to hate you, he would accept that he had that thought. And he would even accept that, of course, that's a possibility. It happens, right, in this world. However, and he wouldn't put any energy fighting it. He would just accept it. It's there. And then he would go right to the truths. And so his energy would not be put into fighting this thought or rehearsing this thought. You're going to fail and all these people are going to lose their jobs. Instead, his energy got redirected into prayerful affirmations, into meditation, into gratitude. And that's what replaced the thought. So the concept with this is that if you don't spend a lot of energy fighting these negative thoughts, but rather redirect them, you actually reprogram your brain, if that makes sense. Let me know if you're tracking with that. Hey, Deb, good to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Oh, yes, my grandbaby is watching me. Oh, because she loves my voice. She still remembers me. My granddaughter still remembers my voice. I'm so happy. So let's look at an example of in Matthew how Yeshua did this. And Mikkel, I actually think this is even going to make it even more plain, more clear. Good. You go into battle mode, and it can be exhausting. Exactly. And you know what, Mikkel? I actually think that the church, the Western church, has sort of trained us to go into battle mode, right? We're always singing about war and conquerors and armies and da 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 da, right? But in fact, it's a lot of energy, and where we see energy going is oftentimes where things are manifesting, and it's just a complete drain. So Matthew 4, if you have a device, and maybe you can follow with me online because this is kind of too much text for me to let you see on the cards. So I'm just going to read you this. Matthew 4, 1 through 10. Then the Spirit led Yeshua up into the wilderness to be tempted by the adversary. After Yeshua had fasted 40 days and nights, he was hungry. Okay, so, no food for 40 days and nights. That's the thing. You're going to be a little weaker than normal, right? So the tempter came, the text goes on, the tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, order these stones to become bread. Now, remember we said that when there's a trauma, when there's an emotional punch, a hit, it has lies connected to it. Lies about God, lies about others, lies about yourself. Here's the perfect example. The adversary says to him, if you are the Son of God, that's a lie about him and a lie about God, order these stones to become bread. Now, on almost all of the temptations that we see in Scripture from the adversary, it's always about taking Scripture and twisting it, right? Just twisting it a little bit and then throwing it out there when a person is confused or not feeling very strong. And this was one of those times. In fact, the whole text, I can't get into how the devil kind of twists it here, but I want you to know that there's a deeper meaning to every single thing that he said. And basically what he's doing here is twisting Scripture and then throwing it at Jesus, okay? So, again, lies about himself, right? If you are the Son of God. But he answered, the text goes on, the Tanakh says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of Adonai. So, he doesn't entertain, Jesus doesn't entertain or imagine or fight the lies, because the lies have no holds. There's no truth in them. He simply speaks a truth about God, about others, and about himself. And he doesn't deny that it's happening, that the temptation is happening. There's an acceptance that it's happening. He's addressing it, he's acknowledging it. He's not agreeing with it. So this would be a really great example, Mikkel, how it's done. Hey, Derek, good to see you. Not sure if Rebecca's with you, but good to have you both, or good to just have you. Shabbat Shalom. Then the text goes on. Then the adversary took him to the holy city and set him on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, jump. For the Tanakh says, he will order his angels to be responsible for you. They will support you with their hands so that you will not hurt your feet on the stones. Okay, this again, he's twisting scripture. And in fact, he's twisting messianic scripture, prophetic messianic scripture, to manipulate Yeshua here. And I can't get into all the deeper meanings. But Yeshua replies to him, but it also says, do not put Adonai your God to the test. So again, he goes to the truth about God and about himself. He doesn't argue. He accepts what's being said to him. He acknowledges that it's there. He just goes right to the truth and doesn't spend any energy arguing with the lie. And this is really a great example for us. The text goes on. Once more, the adversary took him up to the summit of a very high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in all their glory, and said to him, all this I will give you if you bow down and worship me. And again, this lie is about becoming who people want the Messiah to be, which the people wanted the Messiah to be king and priest right out of the gate and restore Israel. So in a sense, the adversary is saying, hey, be who the people want you to be. But Yeshua says, move along. Away with you, Satan, Yeshua told him. For the Tanakh says, worship Adonai your God and serve only him. Again, he counters with truth about God. So I learned to drive. Hey, Rebecca. So I learned to drive on my high school boyfriend's 1973 Chevy van. It was a 3-speed on the column. And I remember him teaching me how to drive, and I was in the driver's seat, and he was sitting across the van in the seat. There was a lot of space, if you remember those older vans with a console in the middle. And he told me, okay, we're going to back up now. We're going to go at a pretty good speed. I want you to learn how to back up using the mirrors. And so I was in reverse, which was in and up, okay, in and up. And I'm backing up at a pretty good speed. And he says, okay, that's good. Now go forward. So I quickly popped in that clutch and rammed that stick shifter into first gear, straight down. All kinds of grinding noises started happening that I really never heard before, except for maybe in trucks. And I panicked and I thought, oh, I'm not doing it quick enough. And so I kept trying to ram it in, thinking I have to do it faster. And I remember my high school boyfriend saying, nope, 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 stop. And finally he jumped over and hit the shifter into neutral. And then he said something very patiently to me because I was ruining his van. You can't go from a fast forwards to a fast, or from a fast backwards to a fast forward. That's really profound. You can't go from a fast backward to a fast forward. You have to put it in neutral, you have to stop, and then you put it in gear to change directions. We've got to take a pause to redirect the mind chatter. And this is the kind of technique that Yeshua used with the adversary's lies. You just observe the thought. You're not fighting all the time. You're not using all that energy. You're not imagining what you fear and putting energy into that. Resisting something, which means you're not thinking about what you do want or what you do believe is the truth. This helps reduce, as we said last week, rumination, so that you can be more present. And remember, rumination is when a cow eats its food, She lets it go down to the belly. She says, I don't think I'm done chewing on it. So I'm going to bring it back up and I'm going to chew on it some more. Pretty gross, right? And she swallows it, then maybe brings it up again. But this is what we do with our fears, with our regret from the past, with our fear of the future. We think about it, we chew on it, we swallow it, and then we bring it up again. But if we're present in the moment and we're looking at what we do want, what we do believe, then we won't be thinking about what we don't. With acceptance, you're not trying to change your thoughts at that moment. You're not trying to go forward yet. You're simply adding a layer of detachment by observing them, but not putting energy into them. You observe it, you don't fight it, you don't invest in it, and that's the pause when you're going in neutral and you're stopping. Acceptance, stop, neutral, then moving forward. So let's say you're having a thought that you're high maintenance. And if you've ever had these reoccurring thoughts, maybe something like this, let me see a thumbs up. You're having a thought that you're high maintenance. By the way, somebody just told me this, and no one will ever really want to love you. Now, instead of saying, oh, I'm afraid I'm high maintenance, I got to dumb myself down, I have to kind of tone down my needs because I want too much and I'm too much and people just think I'm too much. And that, or you say, oh no, I'm not too much. I'm a blessing. I bring a lot to the table when I know people and when I'm in relationships. So you're either in the fearful mode, kind of agreeing with these lies, or you have gone to the truth mode where you're saying your truth, but you're sort of still battling the lies. And once you move into the truth mode, there's no need for battle. The truth already takes care of the lies. You observe that thought. You accept that you're thinking it. It's there. Okay, it's there. The story I'm telling myself is you go into these steps. And by the way, no baby is born with the story, I am not enough or I am too high maintenance. I'm sure Lahava never says, oh man, do you think my parents are getting sick of me now because I'm just crying and I want to eat and I want attention? And or a toddler will say when the toddler is playing with friends, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't dance because I'm bringing attention to myself and I'm too high maintenance. No, you develop these things later on. You develop these stories about your identity later on through messages, through trauma. How did you get that message? The lies in that story are, and you write them down. And then the truths that counter that story are, and you write them down. And if you're having a hard time finding your truth that counters the lies that are hurled about you, look at it like this. If a dear friend of yours were to say the same thing about themselves, what would you say to them? Then speak that to yourself with compassion. Agree with truths and speak them and tell a new story. The power of words and story are incredible to humanity. A story of curiosity, a story of love, a story of creativity, a story of connection. Tell all the fantastic stories about yourself. Someone that I'm counseling with a few weeks ago told me, man, he was getting some real revelation about this. And he said, man, I wish I'd have known these things 15 years ago because my whole life would have been different. And he kind of got into regrets, right? This is a great quote. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. I love that. I'll post that for you. Again, maybe it would have been easier if we'd have known this 10, 15, 20 years ago or 5 years ago. But the second best time is to start right now. So start right now. Shabbat Shalom.